Hello, and welcome to the Radiant Mission podcast. My name is Rebecca Twomey, and I'm here with my co-host and sister, Rachel Smith.
Yes.
Am I going to introduce you like that every time? It's Rachel Smith, or do you want me to start dropping the second Smith?
I'm fine with it. I'm used to it. Like I said on the intro episode, that people actually think that my last name is Smith. So
I just love it. It's the best. But here at the Radiant Mission, we are on a mission to inspire and encourage women in their journey with Christ and walk alongside you through your struggles, whether that's just living in general, because living is not easy, marriage, motherhood, whatever it is that you're going through. We hope to encourage. We hope to talk about topics that'll get you thinking. We just talked about spiritual warfare on our last episode. And so we're going to dig in this episode a little bit deeper. Something else to look forward to is we're going to keep it deep and talk about oppression and possession here pretty soon. And then we're also going to start to talk about some birth stories and kind of the role that spiritual warfare plays in birth. And we're going to actually be having a special guest in a couple episodes as well, talking about infertility. So stay tuned. We've got a lot to talk about. Thank you for being on this mission with us.
I was just going to say, I love that we stayed in the shallow end for a whole 1 or 2 episodes and just like swam fast to the deep end.
I was just going to say, did we really have a shallow end? Because I don't know. It's been
I guess
deep.
That's true.
It's been pretty deep this whole time.
That's kind of why I think you and I even maybe partly felt inspired to have a podcast, is because we never have shallow conversations with each other. It's always
no.
Deep, and we love that.
We don't call each other and we're like, how's it going? How's the weather? How's your kids? Okay, bye. We call each other and talk for 3 to 5 hours. And
so true.
And it's always like the deepest, most, consultative counseling type of conversations that we go through, where we're really working through real life things. And I love that. Which is one of the big reasons that motivated us to this, because we're talking about all these great things, and it's great for us to obviously have our own private conversations, but it's also things that we know people don't talk about enough. Mm-hmm. And so this is interesting, because you actually, I know you're going to immediately go, yep, we've had this conversation about how you and I are often being told that we're oversharers, that we just like go too deep with strangers. Like, I think that happened to you pretty recently, a couple of weeks ago at a party or something. You're like telling somebody all these things, and your husband is like, what? Why are you telling this person these things? But that's just how we are, because we are real.
Yes, we really are.
Keep it real.
Yeah, I imagine by the 50th episode, everyone who listens to this will know every deepest, darkest secret that we have.
So that they're actually, I don't know why, just this popped in my head when you said that. I'm going to admit something, and now some people are going to know this about me. And if my husband can hear me through the walls, he's going to be really mad. But I've been listening, or I have listened to, the newest Justin Bieber album. And he can't stand Justin Bieber, and it makes him really upset. So it's not a Christian album. There's actually one song in there that I can't even listen to it, because it's so, like, I don't know what the word is. Not hypocritical. I can't think of the word. It kind of like makes a mockery of the word holy in a way. It's about how, I know what song I'm talking about? How the relationship is holy.
Yes.
I know the song you're talking about. I skip that song every time because whatever. But there's one song where he talks about how everybody knows my name, and it's like my life is made of glass that everybody can see. It's like his house is made of glass that everyone has seen everything. And then he goes through all these struggles. Nobody cared. Nobody was there for him. Like, nobody talked to him. Anyway, I don't know why that reminded me of what we're talking about, that why after we get to the 50th episode, it'll be like our houses are made of glass.
Yeah.
But also I should probably stop listening to Justin Bieber. But you know what? It's been teaching me things. I think that's why I've been listening to it or interested in it. You and I talked last time a little bit about celebrities and like we've been talking about spiritual warfare and stuff. And I actually have been interested in the lyrics of his lyrics and other artists and how they, I don't, I don't want to go into MK Ultra right now because we're not.
I'm like, it's like screaming in my head.
It's right at the
like,
tip of my tongue, but
I know. Not
but
to
that's
get into
kind
that,
of what
yeah.
has been interesting me, because he says in, I don't remember which song it was, but he talks about this life that like I've lived 1,000 lives or something like that. There's just certain things that he says that I'm like, this is mind control stuff.
Yes.
And
He's one of the greatest examples of that.
I know. And that's, I'm
control.
fascinated from it. I almost, when I listen to it, I feel like I'm like studying, but I probably shouldn't be, because we talked about what you hear, how it impacts you and stuff like that.
I get like that too with some of the stuff that I watch. Speaking of MK Ultra programming, is, the show Stranger Things. That show has so much, like they literally show, and just
I've never seen an episode at all, so you'll have to explain.
I'm not going to endorse this show
because I don't watch Netflix. So
yes, yeah, and it's so violent and it's so demonic. But I'm just, I see what you're saying, in that in my mind, the reason I watch it is because of, I like take notes in my mind of the predictive programming, and that they have the absolute best physical example that Hollywood has put out, maybe, of MK Ultra programming, which was a very real government programming that the CIA has done to people. So if anyone thinks it's a conspiracy theory, it is not. It is a real thing that has exists.
I mean, I think there's a Wikipedia page for it that explains what it is and everything like that. Not that Wikipedia makes it true, but it's basically, how would you define the concept easily for people that aren't familiar with this term?
Basically, the CIA created this program to, like, essentially control people. I mean, I guess that's all in the name of mind control, but it's a matter of breaking down the psyche through, they use a lot of like, I want to say torture, essentially, because we have this innate mechanism in our brain to disassociate when there is too painful of an experience. And so it's essentially tapping into that when you cause someone too much physical or emotional pain. So like, for instance, it could be locking someone in a room with, and I'm not saying this is an example of exactly what they do. I don't know exactly how they do it, because
you haven't been there yet.
Exactly. But for example,
hopefully they don't snatch either of us up after having this conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if I can post this on YouTube, but that's okay.
Really. For example, let's say it's locking someone in a room and like blasting loud music and like having images flashing on the screen. And then eventually that person's mind has to break and disassociate. And then it makes that person easier to control, to do things. So the, I guess what you could say is a conspiracy theory is which I should just reference real quick. The term conspiracy theory itself was literally invented by the CIA. That's literally true. They invented the term to try to discredit people, like realizing
questioning things.
That they're literally torturing people and questioning things. And so they try to make those people who are questioning things seem crazy. But anyway, the theory is that this has happened to a lot of celebrities, especially ones who have been in it since they were children. A great example is Justin Bieber, Britney Spears. And I mean, look at Britney Spears' social media lately. Like that's like prime example of someone who is gone through some stuff. But anyway, the idea is that they are being controlled. And essentially this personality, a front, is created that is easily controlled to do what they want and makes money off of them. So
of course. And a lot of times I think people that fall into this, or, this could definitely cross over with the idea of possession oppression too. When we talk about that, think about someone like Lady Gaga, who or Kesha, who we were talking about the other day, has definitely gotten sucked into a very dark side of things.
Yes, because MK Ultra programming goes hand in hand with witchcraft.
Yeah.
And there is, just because we're on this topic and we didn't even plan to be, and anyone who is,
we're always on the verge of this conversation, by the way. Anytime we ever talk about anything,
always on the verge. But I will say, if anyone has like no idea what we're talking about right now and like, what this is, I've never heard any of this, look up Mary Lou Lake.
There you go.
If you look up, just Google Mary Lou Lake testimony, or don't Google, DuckDuckGo. Google is so compromised. That's like the verb we all use. So, and it'll bring you to her website, and she has, it's like an 8 or 9 part testimony that are like each, it's like a podcast, and each one is like an hour long. So it's like her 8-hour life testimony. And she goes into, she was MK Ultra programmed. She was a part of this in her small town in the Ozarks. And there was a whole witch coven in this town that played into it too. So there's some kind of closeness between these two topics that I don't fully have all the connections for, but I would urge anyone to listen to her testimony. She also has books on Amazon, but it's an amazing testimony.
Well, let's relate it back to real life, because I think, an example, I'm sure a lot of people have heard about cults, or maybe watched a documentary about a cult, or even about anything that's related to that. And you see the same theme go over and over and over. When someone is taught something from an early age, from the time that they're a baby until the time that they're 15, you might consider that programming. We are all programmed. And I'm always going to give this example because it's pertinent to my own personal life, is birth. When I say, somebody's going to have a baby, what is it that every person in the world thinks? You're going to go to the hospital. It's where people have babies in 2022, is in the hospital, or 1986 or 1990 or 2003. For the last 40 years, babies have been born in the hospital. But before that, they weren't born in the hospital. They were born in birthing centers. And then guess what? Like right before that, all the babies were just born at home. And so we are programmed in our current time to think that that is, quote, normal, because that's what, quote, everybody does. But that doesn't mean that it is normal, or that that's how it's supposed to be. It just is how it is, because we are programmed to think that.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that's an example that I think anyone can understand. Or I have a coffee mug here. We're all programmed to think we need to drink coffee out of a coffee mug because it's called a coffee mug. Right?
Like point. You could just drink it out of a glass.
You could drink it out of a glass. You could drink it out of a pot, could drink it out of a bowl, but we drink it out of a coffee mug because that's what society built it to be. And that's how people are programmed. I'm like way off topic here at this point, but I do think that this plays into a lot of our conversations, because we follow these people. Like, these are the people that we as a society look up to. We follow their social media pages. We watch their documentaries on TV. We listen to their music. We watch their music videos. We watch them do whatever it is that they do. And until we take a step back and we go, who is this person that's behind this? Like, clearly, with the example was Justin Bieber. There are some things going on with him. And now there's some health things going on with this guy. I don't know if he's trying to like break out, and so they're trying to kill him or something, but there are things that go on with people, and it's important for us to always ask questions at a minimum. Don't just take things at face value. This drives Mike crazy. My husband, but it drives him crazy that I always am like looking at the deeper meaning in things. And he's just like, why can't you just leave it alone? But I can't leave it alone, because when I listen to someone singing lyrics, and I'm like, he didn't write these lyrics, for some of these songs. Or one of the songs that really irritates me, and I think it's actually the same song with Holy, is it's not him, it's another artist on the track saying something about, he says something about God. And then like literally the next line is like, I get my weed from California.
Oh,
that is a different song. That is a different song. Yeah. And I'm like, these two things don't go together. This is so weird.
Yeah.
He says, I get my life right from the source. Yeah. And then I get my peaches from Georgia. I get my weed from California. Okay, whatever. We can go there another day. Because today we're going to talk about, I say Nephilim, but you don't say, how do you pronounce it?
Nephilim.
I
mean, I don't know.
I'm not correct. I don't know that. I don't know the correct. I just say Nephilim because
I think we're saying the same thing.
I'm reading it, and that's all.
Yeah. Either way is good.
You and I had an amazing conversation about this a while back. Actually, I think it was the time that you came after Ben was born, when you came to visit, and we talked for 60 hours straight and slept for like 2.
Yeah.
And somehow I outlasted you and Mike, and I had like a 6-week-old baby, but that's a whole other
can't
story.
believe it.
It's because this was so fascinating to me. It was really interesting. You've really studied Genesis 6, and you've really just studied the whole thing. So I'm just going to let you talk and share. And like, what have you learned? What happened in Genesis 6? What's the deal with the giants? What's the deal with the gods and goddesses and Hercules and Zeus? And what's the deal with the flood? And what's the deal with these spirits roaming the earth?
Yeah. It's a lot. And I think that this is a huge crux of the Bible that we all
you got a lot of things floating around in your room right
there's
now.
so much. It's probably because I never dust.
I was gonna say, is it spirits? What is it?
Literal dust and hairs. So I'll start this by reading Genesis 6, a few verses in here to kind of kick this off and what we'll talk about, because it'll all kind of tie together, all of those different things you just referenced, especially.
Perfect.
I think how we started on it is like, you asked me like, what exactly are demons? So like, there's kind of answers to all of these things in understanding Genesis 6. And so I'll start with reading.
Perfect.
So starting at verse 1, and it came to be, when men began to increase on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, and they were good. And they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And Yahweh said, my spirit shall not strive with man forever. In his going astray, he is flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of Elohim came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. Those were the mighty men who were of old, the men of name. And Yahweh saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually. And Yahweh was sorry that he had made man on the earth, and he was grieved in his heart. And Yahweh said, I am going to wipe off man, whom I have created from the face of the ground, both man and beast, creeping creature, and birds of the heavens, for I am sorry that I have made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Yahweh. This is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generation. Noah walked with Elohim. So I'll stop there because that's
Doesn't that make you feel really bad for God? I feel bad that he's like,
yes,
I made these beautiful creations, and then we're all scumbags. And
yes,
he's like, oh, this was a mistake.
absolutely.
I'm sure
And
any parent can relate to this when your kid is going through maybe the toddler years. Maybe I'll give an example. For mine, it would be taking toys from other kids. Like other kids come over and she's like acts selfishly or something like that. It's like, oh man, like I did a terrible job. Or like maybe if your kid hits other kids, when they're little, I'm sure we can relate to that as being parents, that it's painful to see your children falling down and stumbling,
corrupt.
or teenagers. It's even worse. I mean, toddlers, that's an easy baby example, but watching your teenagers, I'm sure it was hard for our parents to watch us all stumble and become heathens.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And what I think, anyone who's gone to church has probably read the book of Genesis and read this before. And so it's like we've all heard this before. But what really started to change things for me is studying the Nephilim. And I also have like listened to probably hundreds of hours of content of men and women who are vastly more researched on this than I am. Um, just to name a few, Chuck Missler.
Oh yeah, Chuck,
He
he's the
has,
best.
he's amazing teachings
Mhm.
on the Nephilim. Also, I know I've mentioned this in the podcast before, but the podcast Blurry Creatures, they have on a ton of biblical scholars and authors and guests who have expounded on Genesis 6 and the Nephilim, like Ryan Pitterson, um, uh, Judd Burton, Timothy Alberino, Doug Van Dorn, Michael Heiser. Those are names of just authors and just people. Oh, and Dr. Laura. What's her last name? I can't
Man,
think of it.
can you add all of these names to our notes?
Show
And
notes.
I'll add them
Yes.
to the show notes so that when people go to the show notes for this episode, they can snag some links to some things. I'll link some things
Yes.
up.
Absolutely, especially because I can't think of Dr. Laura's last name off the top of my head right now. Anyways, so I'm just saying, like, I've researched this a ton and learned from other people of understanding what exactly is going on here in this passage of Genesis 6. And I'm not really going to go into the history of things because that's not really my thing. I will just say that there has been a interpretation of this, what is really contingent is in Genesis 6, verse 4. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and also afterwards, when the sons of Elohim, or your Bible version might say the sons of God, came into the daughters of men and they bore children to them. There has been debate for a few hundred years of what's called the Sethite view. Is modern biblical scholars have, and this is what some church or a lot of churches, I think, believe today, that sons of God means the sons of Seth,
Hmm.
And essentially that the daughters were like the daughters of the Canaanites. So there was like a corruption between two human lines. And like I said, I don't want to go into the whole history because I'm not a historian. I just mention that because I think it's a huge disservice that seminary schools have done because this is a much more modern interpretation of this verse, when the text clearly states sons of God, and when you understand the full picture of the spiritual realm and the counsel of God and all that, that sons of God very clearly means um, the angels, or what the fallen angels, or what the book of Enoch calls the watchers. And so I have a copy of the book of Enoch right here, and I'm just going to read something real quick to kind of kick this off, because it's very interesting to me. So we just read Genesis chapter 6, verse 1 through, I think I went to like 9. Mm-hmm. I'm going to read from Enoch chapter 6, verse 1.
Okay.
So tell me if anything sounds familiar here. And it came to pass, when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of the heaven, saw and lusted after them, and said to one another, Come, let us choose us wives from among the children of men, and beget us children. And Semjaza, who was their leader, said unto them, I fear you will not indeed agree to do this deed, and I alone will have to pay the penalty of a great sin. And they all answered him and said, Let us all swear an oath, and all bind ourselves by mutual imprecations, not to abandon this plan, but to do this thing. Then swore they all together and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it.
Wow. So they're basically like, hey, let's all agree to go do this bad thing that we shouldn't do.
Exactly.
And we're going to bind our spirits together. And
exactly. Yes.
Let's go do this thing. It's like like kids committing a crime, getting together.
Yeah, exactly. And it continues. And they were all 200 who descended on the days of Jared and the summit of Mount Hermon. And they called it Mount Hermon because they had sworn and bound themselves by mutual imprecations upon it. And these are the names of the leaders. And it actually lists out 10 names of fallen angels. So the reason that I even read this is that the beginning of Genesis 6 is it came to be when men began to increase on the face of the earth and daughters were born to them, that the sons of Elohim saw the daughters of men, that they were good, and that they took wives for themselves of all whom they chose. And then the beginning of Enoch 6, and it came to pass when the children of men had multiplied, that in those days were born unto them beautiful and comely daughters. And the angels, the children of heaven, saw and lusted after them and chose wives. So it's the exact, there's the verses. I mean, I have different versions here, obviously, but they are word for word the same. It's talking about the same event, but Enoch is giving more detail than we're given in the Bible. And I think one of the reasons for that is that we don't really need more detail than we have necessarily. But I also think part of the reason is there is evidence that the disciples, they read the book of Enoch. They had access to that. And I can't remember.
Yeah, it's another account.
Yes, exactly. So I'm not going to say that it's canon or it should be canon. I don't really know. I don't have any firm statement on that. But what I do know is that the Bible writers, they read that and they knew of it.
And they said, oh, this one, yes, this one, no, basically. Yeah. Right. Genesis, we'll keep it. Enoch.
Yes.
And maybe at the time they said, oh, well, it's repetitive, but Genesis, we have these things. Or maybe they didn't want the detail out there for people to really know and understand. Not saying that there was any ill intent per se, but.
Well, there are some sects of Christianity that do include the book of Enoch. Sure, I'm pretty sure, I'm going off my memory here, but I'm pretty sure Ethiopian Christians, which are one of the most ancient sects of Christianity, they have the book of Enoch in their Bible. So there's all these different councils that happen at different time that chose what would go in and what wouldn't. And So for whatever reason, it was chosen not to go in, but there is so much more when you hold it next to the Bible. It's giving you so much more background information for what the details the Bible does give us. And the Bible does give us enough detail in that it talks about, in the very same chapter of Genesis 6, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and it calls them mighty men, men of old, men of renown. And so what we can conclude here just from Genesis is that these, so I mentioned the historical position that much of the church, I believe, has wrongly taken, which is the Sethite view, which is talking about humans. Okay. It's not talking about humans. This is
it's talking about fallen angels.
Exactly. And the book of Enoch backs that up because it literally says that. But there's plenty of other references in the Bible. And I just think it's
so I want to ask you about the fallen angel part. Why were they kicked out of heaven?
Well, like we talked about on our last episode, when Satan,
he shall who not be named.
Yeah, he shall not be named. Yes. And I even read that verse that Yeshua saw him fall from heaven like lightning.
You think he punted him out?
He was there. Yeah. But he wanted to be worshiped like Yahweh. And this is really important for what we're about to get into. He wanted to be worshiped. And so he took or deceived, or I don't know exactly the background reasons why, a third of the angels with him, and a third of the angels are the watchers.
That's right.
And
okay.
And
so he's like their leader, angels. And they formed a mutiny against God. Basically, they're like, we're out of here.
Yeah. Yeah. And so from the details that Enoch gives us, it's 200 of these fallen angels, which there could be way more than that.
Well, if it said that there was a third and 200 went with him, then we do have a better idea of the number, the total.
Right? No, I mean, what Enoch is saying is that 200 decided to conspire to take human wives. Yes.
200 of them.
Yeah. 200 of them. So there was, my interpretation is there could have been way more who stayed out of this.
I see.
Actually, I've heard, I'm pretty sure it's Timothy Alberino who's spoken on this, that he believes that Satan, or he who shall not be named, he believes that he wasn't involved in this, that he wasn't one of them that was, marrying a human woman and procreating. Now, that's not to say he didn't encourage it. He could have been on the side, just like he was with Eve, like, why shouldn't you get to partake in that? And he goes into a lot of detail about the authority that man has that angels did not, that God created the earth and we're created in his image. And that the angels, the watchers, are also created in God's image, but they have a different role. They had their role in heaven, and so those that fell are cast to the earth. But man, our role was created for the earth and to have authority here. And so when Satan defects from the kingdom of heaven, he is now roaming to and fro on earth, is the language that's used in the book of Job. And so are these other X number amount of watchers. And Enoch names 10 of them involved, but specifies that 200 made an agreement, like made a pact that that this was going to get them in trouble with God because it was going against God's laws, but they were going to go down together, is essentially what it said. And so this is why this is so pertinent, is I am getting to a point here, is the Nephilim. What is it saying in here is the Nephilim.
Yes.
The Nephilim is the offspring of a human woman and an unhuman fallen angel.
Yes.
And
Yes. So
that is not a part of God's design. That is not something that God allowed. And that's why that language used in Enoch about them making that pact, is they knew this was going to be a very grievous sin. And then we see in Genesis, it is a very grievous sin, because
I want to just throw out there, we have this depiction in our current modern society that an angel looks just like us, but it has like these white wings and a halo.
Yeah.
But that's not how that doesn't necessarily describe what an angel really looks like. An angel could look like that, but maybe be 10 times the size of a human being. That's something I think you're going to explore when you start to talk about what the Nephilim offspring, so the human with the angel offspring, is Nephilim, and what they look like.
Yeah.
Because we, like you said, we're made in the image of God, but I don't think that it says that angels look exactly like God. Right?
So I'm of the opinion, I do think that angels look like us. And I formed this opinion. It's kind of like throughout different places in scripture, like not any one place defining it, like, but just the times. So it's kind of a conclusion made from the times, like think of in the New Testament, I think it's Paul who says that you could be careful like how you treat a stranger, because you could be entertaining an angel unaware. Or another one is in Genesis and later with Abraham, when the 3 angels come to him, one of which is the angel of the Lord, which is a title for the Son of God in the Old Testament. But there's 2 other men with him, and it calls them men. And Abraham serves them food, and he recognized that as them as angels. Like he knows this is the angel of the Lord, but they appear as men. And so, and then also just like in the Genesis 6 text, that they could copulate with human women.
That's true.
Would indicate that they have to, and this is like, I'm not going to like sit here and pretend I got this all figured out, but like the implications that they then have a male part that can do it with the female part.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't know if anyone has the answers to all of this.
Yeah.
But if we sit and use our imaginations.
Well, if they can procreate, there's something there.
Yes. And I've heard people talking about that their theories that one of the reasons that they wanted to do this with women is that whatever, God created them to be something different. They are different than human, even if they do look, or we look like them. They are different. They have different abilities than us, and they're able to work in a different realm. Yeah. Dimension. That's a good word for it. Yes. I was going to say dimension, but I think realm is probably a better word for it. But I have heard people theorize that they think that they were all men, and that they did not have the ability to procreate within each other. Like there's no female angel, essentially.
Okay.
So one of the reasons
this is about,
exactly one of the reasons they left
sounds like something a man would do.
Yes, it does. That's it. But it's like God created, and this is what is unique about God's creation of humans, Adam and Eve, is he created Adam, and then from Adam's body, from his rib, he created Eve, which the text calls a helpmate. So it's like, perhaps this is, a theory here, is perhaps humans are the only creature that has a counterpart of that comes together and procreates, literally creating another soul.
Yeah.
And so could it be, and I'm trying to emphasize,
well, that's a good point, Because if there were female angels, they would have to have eggs like a female woman.
Right.
And then they could procreate. So that's another kind of layer to the male
Right.
part.
Yeah. So there's
Although if they're male, they have the ability with their sperm. So it's very interesting.
Yes. So there's no language in the Bible ever of a female angel. So
I thought that there were female angels. Wasn't the no, I guess not. I was going to say, wasn't the angel that came to Mary a woman, but no, it wasn't.
No, that was Gabriel.
That was Gabriel.
Yeah. So, yeah. So they essentially, like, that's like the theory is that, you know, one of the reasons that they wanted to do this. And another reason that they would want to do this is, you know, to have their own children, but also to have authority over what essentially, like, they're sneakily trying to bypass what the laws of creation that God set in place in for man, and that the only way that they could have any authority on earth is to create a child exactly that has human DNA, which then gives their child authority.
Sure. So they're filling their quiver.
Exactly.
I love that.
That's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Well, I don't love that for them, but I mean, I just love that verse where the Lord tells us to fill our
children
quiver.
Are arrows. Yeah. Yeah. And
against the enemy. Well, so the enemy, technically, if he brought down with him these folks, he's like, I'm going to fill my quiver too. And we can go to war, which is kind of what we're getting at with what eventually is a theory of happens with the Nephilim. But before we get to that, I want to talk a little bit with you about the looks, though, because I know, you know, I just asked you about what do the angels, the fallen angels, look like? But then the Bible, it talks about when giants roamed the earth. So what's the deal with that?
Yes. So the Nephilim are the giants, and the Nephilim are the children of these watchers, these fallen angels.
Was it like the humans and the watchers? It just didn't work out that they didn't create these beautiful babies.
No,
they ended up with
their
giants.
Babies were monsters. Yes, exactly. and actually, I've heard people say that they think that the watchers must have been like, what have we done? That realized what they did was a mistake because their children were literally monsters. And I don't know exactly how that would have worked, as, like, you know, I'm postulating here, but like, were the women literally giving birth to these giant babies and being split in half and dying? Yeah. Or were they born a normal baby size and, like, you know, think of almost like giganticism or whatever the word is, but they grew at a rapid pace and then there's a lot of theories on how tall did giants get. And I don't know the answer to that.
How giant were they? Were they like 6 feet, 7 feet, 8 feet? Like,
right.
6 foot is not a giant.
No. But I think it's safe to say
10 feet,
anywhere from 8 feet to 200 feet are the possibilities here. I mean, a lot of people think it's crazy to think that there were giants that were 200 feet tall, but then there is some like kind of allusions to it. Like, if you go further, giants is mentioned. I saw someone, I'm pretty sure that I'm going off the top of my head. I think the number is 644 times, 600 and something times in the Bible, the giants are mentioned.
Interesting.
That's big.
That's a lot.
Literally, no pun intended. Yes. So there's some text that describes giants as like in the book of Joshua, when they are going into the land of Canaan, and this is after the flood, and they're scouting it out and they're terrified. They come back absolutely terrified, and they say, we were grasshoppers in their sight. Like, think about, and this is one of the reasons why some people like speculate that they were hundreds of feet tall, because think about how tall would something have to be for it to be a grasshopper. And then other people, other people then say that that was figurative language and whatever. And, then maybe they were 10 or 15 feet. Either way, they were far larger than humans. And these are the Nephilim, and they not only though was whatever genetically happened between a watcher and a human DNA created a giant monster, but they were completely depraved. It corrupted the DNA of humans after that. And that from that point on, their desire was bloodlust. It was literally cannibalism, eating humans, like the most disgusting, depraved,
well, when you're 20 feet tall, you got to eat something.
Yes. And so this is,
I'm making a joke, but it's not funny.
This is what I think is so pertinent today, because I've heard people say before, like believers, of like, what does this matter for us? Like, who cares? Like almost like getting caught up in, fantasy land. One, it matters because it's in the Bible.
Yeah, for sure. And we skim through it, because I find it interesting that I never had this conversation ever until I was in my 30s.
Right.
And me like too. We've talked about, we've been believers for our whole entire lives.
Yes.
So the fact that we've been believers our whole lives and we didn't talk about this for 30 years, it just goes to show how little it is talked about in churches.
Absolutely. So
and we've been to quite a number of churches, both you and I.
Yes.
It's not like we are at the same one for the whole time,
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
You moved 700 times. So
yeah. So it is important for that reason. And it's also important because the flood was a catastrophic event that essentially splits history. The next time history is split in such a way is at the cross. So this is important because I just read it right there, is one of the core reasons why God flooded the earth. And people are missing that, just saying, oh, man was completely corrupt and all their thoughts were evil. Why were all their thoughts evil? Why were they completely corrupt? It just said it. Because the Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterwards. And then it explained how they got there through the sons of God and the daughters of men. And God then regretted ever making man, because everything was the design ruined. That he made, that perfect DNA from Adam, was completely corrupt. Every single man left had Nephilim DNA, because they were procreating and they were also destroying everyone who is pure blood except for one. And that is Noah. And it says it right there that, and this is really important. And this is what I learned from Chuck Missler, is when it says in verse 9, this is the genealogy of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, perfect in his generation. Noah walked with God. Perfect in his generation. His DNA was still pure. So when you look at things from this perspective of understanding what happened between the watchers and the daughters of men and creating the Nephilim, and that the Nephilim then ran rampant on the earth, corrupting all flesh, including animals too, by the way. They also copulated with animals, creating hybrid creatures, which we'll get into more in a few minutes, probably.
So where alligators came from?
I was going to say like Greek mythology of like, think about a centaur.
Oh, that's right. Yeah. I was going to ask you about that too, because that's an interesting kind of theory. Like, it's come up time and time again, things in Greek mythology and these Greek gods and things like that. It's come up a lot in history, and it's often treated like a Marvel movie. And I'm not saying that it's not, but there also could be some indications that those types of things could exist.
So this is, to touch on that real quick, this is what's so fascinating as I've studied world religion, is that all religions since the beginning have been creating the same pattern and telling the same story. And it all has been to detract humans from worshiping the Most High, the only God, Yahweh. And, it happened in Mesopotamia and Babylon, in which began with Nimrod, who actually there's evidence he became a giant, and so had this corrupt DNA, and then continued through the Egyptians and Greeks and Romans, is they all have things in common of this thread that is seen of like this background of world religion, false religion being created in Genesis 6. And that is these watchers, because they had no authority to earth or on earth, they used their Nephilim children, so demigods, that's what they were. They were half human, half quote unquote gods, little g gods, and they use them to have authority on earth. And this is where it comes into the Greek mythology, or other cultures, mythologies, is that you can see this theme in there. There is the in Greek mythology, there's the gods like Zeus and Poseidon, and then they have children with human women and create demigods like Hercules, or what's another one? Atlas, I think, is one of them, or something.
I only think of that one with like the snakes. What's that one? The snake.
Oh, Medusa. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. But to bring up even marvels, is that's what Thor is. Thor is from the mythology, and is I think that's what's it called, like the Celtic or whatever mythology, but that he's a demigod. And all of this is coming back to this because it's been happening for thousands of years, that they are then humans commit idolatry over the thousands of years, worshiping these demigods and false gods that the watchers have set themselves up to be.
Because almost like the humans are seeing these crazy creatures come out, and they're like, wow, I've never seen anything like this. This must be, and then they're saying, yeah, I'm a god.
And it's more powerful than them. Yeah, absolutely. And the same can be it was done in the Egyptian culture too, is that they not only had all of these thousands of gods and demigods that they worshiped and prayed to, but then they even said that their pharaohs were gods and were worshipped, and elaborately. So this is why this is pertinent, because it's absolutely pervasive through all of history, and it didn't stop at the flood for whatever reason. And there's a lot of different theories on why, but the reason really that I think that this is so important for anyone who believes the Bible as truth to understand is this right here is the core of why God had to flood the earth, and that Noah was the only one who was genetically pure. He was the only one perfect in his generation, him and his sons. And so 8 people were preserved. And there are a few theories.
8 whole people.
Exactly. 8 whole people left on the whole planet. Everyone else was corrupt or
That's
killed.
rough. That's really rough.
Yeah. And so I've heard people say, people who like deconstruct from the church, or people who are atheists and don't believe the Bible, and they say accuse Christians of worshiping a God who would just kill millions of people in a flood. Like, why would you worship a God like that? And this is why these false interpretations of what has happened here has done such a disservice to God's word, is because it's very clear why God did that. It was the only way to preserve humanity. Not a single one of us.
Literally eating each other.
Exactly. Not a single one of us would be here today if he didn't flood the earth. And he could have killed everyone. He didn't have to save Noah. That was grace. That was his grace.
He could have wiped everybody and started over.
Exactly.
Thank you so much for listening to this week's episode of the Radiant Mission podcast. We covered a lot in this episode, but we still have a lot more to cover when it comes to the Nephilim and the spiritual realm. So stay tuned where we continue this conversation next week. In the meantime, if you'd like to follow along with the mission, find us on Instagram at The Radiant Mission or join our new Facebook page. Simply enter facebook.com/The Radiant Mission Podcast. And since we are focused on the grace of Yahweh, I would love to finish with the verse from Numbers 6, verses 24 through 26. The Lord bless you and keep you. The Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. The Lord turn his face toward you and give you peace. Wishing you a radiant week.